Because it feels like your first movie, Repo Man, is a bit. It has a to me it has a bit of a Western feel. Definitely taking Route 66 when the movie starts off. You see the car following Route 66.
I think, yeah, a Western's a template for a lot of different things. I mean, there certainly are Western elements or Western kind of plot elements in a lot of the films that I've done. Um, and the Western's good in that way because it's a very broad canvas. You can use it for a lot of purposes, and and I guess that's why it hasn't died, even though it's definitely it's definitely in decline or has been in decline for many many years. But people still keep making those films.
I mean, there is something to be said about the landscape, and I, was looking on your Kickstarter when I donated. I think it was either earlier this week or last week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for making provocative films. As I live in Mexico now, so I definitely
Where in
appreciate.
Mexico?
I'm in Baja.
Oh wow! What's which part of Baja?
I'm in northern Baja in Rosarito.
Beautiful.
I love it. I love it. So I have one side of me um, faces the mountains, and it's pretty deserty. Cactus grow wild, and of course, the other side is the ocean. Um, but I've always appreciated kind of the Southwest landscape, touring for years, and making that drive up and down the I-15, seeing those red rocks in Utah. Driving across Texas. There's something about the vastness, and there's also something frightening about that vastness as well. Um, we were having a conversation on a show we did a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, JG and I, where we asked the question: Are slasher movies did they become kind of westerns for a while?
Yeah, I don't know. I've never really been into horror films very much, and I'm not a big fan of torture. So that's a genre with which I'm not very familiar, except
Oh,
for
fair enough.
the
Fair enough.
original Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, that kind of thing I could discourse on. But other than that, horror films have never really been my bag.
It is interesting, though. I mean, the amount of directors that have been influenced by westerns over the years. I always make the joke that, if you watch enough Paul Schrader films, you get the feeling that he's like reimagining The Searchers each time with the way he tells his stories. And John Carpenter, of course, was very influenced by westerns. So I think it's interesting how many directors have been influenced by the Western genre. And I think it's for a lot of the reasons you already pointed out. There's sort of a template you can follow with them.
Yeah, and that generation, especially of John Carpenter and Paul Schrader, and I guess it's my generation too. I mean, we grew up seeing them in the movie theaters. It wasn't just something that you would see streaming or on a DVD. They actually played in the cinema in those days.
I mean, so I guess that's why the science fiction western is something that your generation comes up with.
Well, also John Carpenter made that wonderful film They Live,
Hmm.
which is really quite something. I mean, the first half, 2/3 of They Live is just about as good as it gets. It's absolutely very special.
Oh, maybe the greatest fight scene in cinema history. Right?
The fight in the alley is where for me, it sort of starts to go downhill after that. They don't quite have a conclusion to the film.
Where can you go after something that epic?
Yeah, that's right.
Right? If you cut it short, the scene doesn't hit the same way. So you have to show the whole thing. And then where can that movie go? Again, I don't know how they cut it. I don't know if John had a different idea and the studio was like, maybe that's a little too much.
I think but I mean, obviously he enjoyed it. He enjoyed that kind of that world of wrestling and stuff. I mean, it's just that after that, it's hard to figure out how to finish the film because it's got such a great opening. I mean, it's how many films are there where the hero is a homeless guy?
Oof, that's a
And this
good
is
point.
an American
Oof.
Hollywood universal picture. Amazing. And then he makes this discovery. When he puts the glasses on, and boy, man, it's dynamite. It's dynamite. So it's very hard to figure out.
That's a really good point, especially the way the homeless is being demonized in American campaigns right now politically. To go back and watch They Live from that perspective, that it starts off with an unhoused man looking for work who becomes the hero. That's really, I don't know if you can make that movie today.
No, you couldn't. And you couldn't make Repo Man either because of what we said about John Wayne. It would be,
Oh,
you know,
oh
it's not a
man.
very woke movie.
That was one of the discussions. So after we watched the movie, we watched it with everybody kind of online in like a group setting, like a Zoom setting almost, and we get to talk about it. And that was definitely one of the comments people had about was the John Wayne line, because it feels like it comes out of nowhere and just like, whoa.
And I was told that story as truth because I knew a guy that we called Swatty.
Mhm,
And he had a company in Santa Monica called Arrow Glass and Mirror. So
mhm.
he claimed that he had installed two-way mirrors in John Wayne's house in Brentwood. And John Wayne came to the door in a dress. That's the story that he told me. So like a lot of things in Repo Man, these were things that people really said to me. And I was just the scribe.
JG, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, I don't want this to become like the They Lived show, but since you mentioned They Live, and Alex, I kind of agree with you actually. The fight scene that everyone talks about, I think there's other aspects that get overlooked when we talk about that film. I got to see it in a theater in 35 millimeter,
Wow.
at an indie type theater a few years back, and just that scene where they're invading the homeless encampment, and just wrecking everything, the sort of shock troops of the alien overlords. That's
Otherwise
like
known
a
as the
really
LAPD and
impactful
the
scene.
sheriffs, right?
Say
What's
that again.
that?
I didn't hear
Otherwise known as the LAPD and the sheriffs.
Right,
you.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Well, the other scene that I always remember is that there's this monologue that Roddy Piper gives, where he talks about how his dad just became this like mean person, and he talks about the power and the glory and all this stuff, and it's I feel like it's moments like that where he's Carpenter is sort of dealing with the meanness of the Reagan era. It's those moments in between the big fight scenes that for me stand out in films like that. How important do you think just the sort of moments in between the big action set pieces are when making a movie?
Oh, I mean, obviously they're very important because the big action set pieces sort of make themselves. I mean, if you've got a scene that says, they clear the homeless encampment, well, the assistant directors are going to take care of that, and the stunt guys. And the director just sort of sits back in the trailer or in their director's chair and watches it all happen, and then the editor puts it together. So the action scenes, although they're fun to edit, action scenes are really fun to edit, but I think that they're largely schematic in terms of making them. Now, some people would disagree. Obviously, I mean, if Sam Peckinpah, shooting the action scene was the most important thing for him. That was what he loved the most.
Mhm.
But for me, the action scenes are kind of filler in between, like you say, in between the really interesting stuff.
We have a super chat question for you. Do you see the question on the screen on the side, Alex?
It says, "Love the film. It was crazy seeing a punk become a reactionary." What is your opinion on the hose? Loyal, not loyal? No need to answer that question. What was it like working with Emilio Estevez? Spelt wrong. He was fine. He was a good actor. I mean, he. I really wanted to make the film with a guy called Dick Rude. Uh,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Dick Rude is the guy who plays Otto's
Mhm,
best friend
mhm.
Duke, who's just out of juvie and dies tragically in a liquor store shootout. Um, and I wanted to make it with Dick. And I know that Cy Richardson, who plays one of the Repo Men, he was much keener on working with Dick than working with Emilio. But the thing was, you have to, it's all about compromise. It's all about diplomacy. If you're making a film for a studio, you can't make it with unknown individuals. You have to have certain names that will give them confidence. And especially because in the case of Repo Man, the lead actor was Harry Dean Stanton, a
Mhm.
brilliant American character actor who'd never had a lead role before. And so we kind of had to cast this guy who was the son of Martin Sheen because he was Hollywood royalty, and that gave the studio a bit more confidence.
So this time around, you're bypassing the studio system, and I'm going to do a show on this channel coming up, asking the question, "What is Hollywood a year after the strike?" Uh, how do you see making films in the studio system today? Is crowdfund? This is going to be a two-part question, multi-part question. Is crowdfunding, in your opinion, the way it is now, easier than what it would have looked like in the 80s or 90s with the internet? Um, and are you opposed to the studio system? So if a studio was like, you're a proven commodity because you did this thing that became a cult classic, we want you to do a streaming series. Here's a comfortable barrel of money.
Oh yeah, but that will never happen with me because I made a film called Walker. You know, I made a film called Walker about American imperialism while the United States was de facto at war with Nicaragua,
Yes.
and killing thousands of Nicaraguans. So there's no way the studios are ever going to give me money ever again. So therefore, I just have had to find my own way. And so I've made films that were funded by Japan. I've made Mexican films. I've made films that were funded by a Dutch television company, by the BBC, uh, by private investors, by crowdfunding. It's all wherever the money can be found. Wherever the money can be found, I will take that money and I will spend it.
Do you think it's easier to go the crowdfunding route than it was trying to drum up money back in the day?
No, it's a lot more work. It's a lot more work because you have to do a lot more outreach. You have to you interact with the people who are crowdfunding the film. At the end of the day, when the film is finished, your work begins again because you have to create all the DVD elements, all the Blu-ray elements, the posters. You have to sign them. You have to put them in an envelope, mail them out. You know, it's a lot of work, but it's a way of raising money to make a film, and that's the important thing.